Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be talking about the future of AI, but not just any future of AI. We're talking about the future according to Yann LeCun.
Yeah,
You probably know him as one of the godfathers of deep learning. He won the Turing Award back in 2019.
that's right, the Nobel Prize of Computing.
So yeah, he knows what he's talking about.
He does.
And this deep dive is going to be based on his recent presentation at the AI Action Summit 2025.
Lots of really interesting ideas in there.
Yeah, I mean, like right out of the gate, he kind of throws down the gauntlet. He says that machine learning as we know it today basically sucks.
He did say that, huh?
Yeah, and he's not talking about like small issues here. He's talking about fundamental limitations when it comes to building truly intelligent systems.
It's like all this hype around AI, you
Yeah,
can see it everywhere.
right.
But LeCun's point is that despite all the progress we've made, we're still a long way from creating machines that can truly think like humans do.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We have these AIs that can write poems and code and stuff, but we still can't build a robot that can, like, reliably clean up the dishes after dinner.
Yeah, that's one of his examples. He says we can't even build robots that have the intelligence of a house cat.
Oh, yeah, he mentioned that too.
Like, think about it. Even a cat can understand basic physics, right?
Yeah.
They can jump and land on their feet, navigate their environment, avoid obstacles. We're not even close to that with machines.
It's kind of weird when you think about it that way.
Yeah, it's like the things that are easy for us humans, like walking and talking and understanding the world around us, are actually really difficult for machines.
Like the opposite of what you'd expect.
Right, and that's actually a well-known concept in AI called Moravec's paradox.
Huh, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, basically it says that the things we find easy are hard for computers, and the things we find hard are easy for computers.
That is interesting.
It's because our brains have evolved over millions of years to be really good at those things like perception and movement, but we're not so good at things like logical reasoning and calculation.
Which is what computers excel at.
Exactly.
So LeCun uses this disconnect between the hype and reality of AI to launch into his critique of large language models.
Ah, yes, the LLMs.
Yeah, the darlings of the AI world right now.
It seems like everyone's talking about them.
Yeah, they're pretty impressive. I mean, they can generate all sorts of creative text formats, answer your questions in an informative way.
Even write different kinds of creative content.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But LeCun's point is that they're still missing something crucial for true intelligence.
And that is?
He says that LLMs are limited because they're only trained on text data.
Oh, okay, so they're only learning from language.
Exactly. And he makes this really interesting analogy. He says it's like trying to teach a child about the world solely through audiobooks.
Ah, I see what you mean.
They might be able to learn a lot of facts and information, but they'll lack the grounded understanding that comes from real-world experiences.
Right, the kind of understanding you get from actually interacting with the world.
Through your senses.
Yeah, sight, touch, sound, all those things we take for granted.
And LeCun argues that those sensory experiences are essential for building a true understanding of the world.
Yeah, because they provide so much more information than just text alone.
Exactly. Think about how much data a baby takes in just by looking around a room.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
And that's the kind of data that LLMs are missing out on.
So it's not just about feeding AI more data, it's about the type of data and how it's used to build a model of the world.
And LeCun actually put some numbers to this. He says that a 4-year-old child, just by living and interacting with the world, has processed as much visual data as the biggest LLM has textual data.
Wow, that's a pretty stark comparison.
It really highlights the importance of diverse sensory input for intelligence.
Okay, so we've got the problem with too much focus on just text data. And then LeCun goes on to talk about the limitations of autoregressive models, right?
Right, which are the foundation of these LLMs.
Okay, so what exactly is an autoregressive model?
Well, imagine you're writing a sentence, word by word.
Okay.
Each word you choose depends on the words that came before it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's how autoregressive models work. They predict one token at a time.
Token.
Yeah, a token could be a word or a punctuation mark or any other building block of language.
Okay, so like pieces of language.
Right, and they make these predictions based on the previous tokens they've seen.
So they're kind of building the sentence piece by piece.
Exactly.
But where's the issue with that?
Well, LeCun argues that this approach leads to what he calls divergence.
Divergence.
Yeah, it's like each prediction, each word in our sentence analogy has a tiny chance of being slightly off,
Okay.
but over a long sequence, those errors accumulate.
And that's what causes the problem.
Exactly. It leads to nonsensical outputs.
Like when LLMs just make stuff up.
Yeah, exactly. That's why they sometimes hallucinate.
Hallucinate.
Yeah, make up facts or go off on these tangents that don't make any sense.
Oh, right, right.
They're essentially making these educated guesses, and those guesses can easily go astray.
So if autoregressive models aren't the way to go, what does LeCun suggest instead?
He believes we need AI systems that learn world models.
World models, huh?
Yeah.
What are those?
Well, imagine an AI that can simulate how the world works
Okay.
and predict the consequences of actions just like we do.
Like, it can imagine what would happen if it did something.
Exactly. It's not just about recognizing patterns. It's about understanding cause and effect.
Okay.
Physics, the basic rules of the game.
So it's like having a deeper understanding of how things work.
Right. And that's what allows us, and even a simple house cat, to plan and act effectively in the world.
So it's about more than just pattern recognition. It's about understanding how your actions affect the world around you.
Exactly.
And how does this connect to JEPA,
Ah, yes, JEPA.
the solution he proposes?
Right. JEPA stands for Joint Embedding Predictive Architecture.
That is a mouthful.
It is.
Can you break it down for us?
Sure. So instead of predicting raw sensory data,
Okay.
like pixels in a video, JEPA focuses on predicting abstract representations.
Abstract representation.
Yeah, it's about capturing the underlying dynamics of a scene.
So not every single detail.
Right, it's like if you're trying to predict every single pixel in the next frame of a video, that's practically impossible.
Yeah, that would be insane.
So JEPA simplifies things by focusing on the things that are actually predictable.
Like a tree swaying in the wind.
Right,
Or a person walking across the street.
exactly, the essence of the scene.
The gist of it.
Exactly.
Okay, so JEPA sounds pretty cool in theory, but how do you actually build these world models?
Well, that's where things get a bit more complicated.
I bet.
Training JEPA is no walk in the park.
What are some of the challenges?
Well, one of the big ones is preventing what's called collapse.
Collapse, what's that?
It's like when the AI takes a shortcut
Okay.
and learns a trivial solution that doesn't actually capture the complexity of the data.
So it's not really learning anything useful.
Right, it's like imagine a sculptor trying to shape clay. If the clay is too soft, it'll just collapse into a shapeless blob.
Ah, I see what you mean.
We need to make sure the AI captures the essential contours of the data and prevents it from becoming a blob.
So how do you avoid that?
Well, LeCun explores several approaches, but he seems to favor something called VIC.
VIC.
Yeah, it stands for variance invariance covariance regularization.
I am not going to remember that.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
But can you explain it in a way that I can understand?
Sure, so think of VIC as a tool that maximizes the information content in the AI's representations.
Okay.
It ensures that the model is actually learning meaningful features from the data and not just taking shortcuts.
So it's like making sure the sculptor's clay is firm enough to hold its shape
Exactly.
and capture all the details of the sculpture.
Right, VIC helps JEPA learn something substantial, not just the easy way out.
Makes sense.
And this leads us to an even more intriguing concept,
Huh?
which is
Gyno world models.
I know world models.
Yeah, that sounds kind of cool, right?
Yeah, what are those all about?
Well, imagine an AI that can not only understand the world,
Okay.
but also imagine the consequences of its actions.
Whoa, so we can think about what would happen if it did something.
Exactly. That's what Dino World models are designed to do. It could combine these learned visual representations with action prediction.
So it can kind of see into the future?
In a way, yeah.
That's pretty wild.
It allows the AI to essentially imagine what would happen if it did something.
Give me an example.
Okay, so imagine a robot that's tasked with pushing blocks to a target location
Okay.
using its Dino World model. The robot can plan its actions by simulating the outcomes in its internal world model.
So it's like running a simulation in its head
Exactly.
before actually doing anything in the real world. Right, and it can see how different actions would affect the blocks and choose the sequence that's most likely to achieve its goal.
That's amazing.
It's like having a mental rehearsal before taking the stage.
So we've gone from AI that struggles to clear a table to AI that can imagine the consequences of its actions.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing.
It feels like we're on the verge of something big, a real shift in how we think about and build intelligent means.
I think LeCun would agree with that.
And that's just the beginning of his vision. He has a lot more to say about the future of AI.
He does.
And it gets even more interesting from here. I can't wait to hear what else he has in store. Okay, so LeCun thinks that current AI approaches, especially these popular LLMs, are not really the right way to go when it comes to intelligence. But he has some ideas for a better path forward, right?
He does, yeah. And it's not just theoretical. You know,
Oh.
he actually gives some real-world examples of how these ideas could work.
Oh, cool. Like what?
Well, one area he talks about is navigation. Yeah, imagine an AI system that learns to navigate not through like maps or GPS, but by actually understanding what the world looks like
Okay.
and how its actions change its viewpoint.
So instead of like pre-programmed instructions or whatever, it's actually learning to navigate more like we do.
Exactly, by recognizing landmarks, understanding spatial relationships, that kind of thing.
I can see how that would be so important for robots, especially if they need to operate in complex environments.
Exactly, not everything can be mapped out in advance.
Right.
And this kind of goes back to LeCun's overall message. He's urging the AI community to move away from some of the dominant paradigms.
You mean like all the buzz around generative AI and reinforcement learning?
Yeah, those are two big ones he calls out.
Okay.
Like, take reinforcement learning, for example. It's been super successful in some areas, like game playing.
Right.
But LeCun argues it's fundamentally inefficient for achieving real intelligence.
In what way?
Well, reinforcement learning basically involves training AI agents through trial and error.
Okay.
They interact with their environment, receive rewards for good actions, penalties for bad ones,
So they learn by doing.
right? But this process can be really data-intensive and time-consuming.
Like learning to ride a bike by crashing over and over again?
Exactly, ouch. And even then, the AI might only be good at that specific task it was trained on.
Right. It might not be able to like generalize to new situations or adapt to unexpected changes.
Exactly.
So it sounds like LeCun is saying that while reinforcement learning has its place, it's not the ideal solution for building truly intelligent machines.
Right, he sees it as a last resort, something to use when the AI doesn't have a good enough understanding of the world.
Okay, so instead of just throwing tons of data at the problem, he's advocating for a more principled approach, building those robust world models we talked about.
Exactly.
And to achieve this, he actually gives some pretty strong recommendations for researchers.
He does.
He even goes as far as to say, abandon generative models and stop working on LLMs. Whoa, he doesn't hold back, does he?
He doesn't mince words, that's for sure.
It's a pretty bold statement, considering how popular those approaches are right now.
There's a bit of provocation there for sure. But he's serious about the underlying message. He believes that while these approaches have produced some impressive results, they're ultimately dead ends for achieving human-level AI.
It's like he's saying, look, we've been playing around long enough. It's time to get serious and build something truly groundbreaking.
Exactly, and he highlights several key areas that he believes are crucial for moving forward.
Okay, like what?
Well, he talks about developing better planning algorithms,
Okay.
exploring JEPA architectures with something called latent variables.
Latent variables?
Yeah, they're basically hidden variables that capture underlying relationships in the data,
Interesting.
and tackling the challenge of hierarchical planning.
Hierarchical planning, what's that?
Well, think about how we humans approach complex tasks.
Okay.
We break them down into smaller, more manageable subtasks, right?
Like if you're planning a trip, you don't just think about the end goal of arriving at your destination. You break it down into steps.
Exactly, booking flights, packing bags, arranging transportation, and so on.
Like a project management chart with all those interconnected tasks?
Exactly, it can get pretty complex.
Yeah.
And this ability to plan hierarchically, to break down big goals into smaller achievable steps, is something we haven't quite figured out how to do in AI.
It sounds pretty fundamental, though, if we want AI to solve real-world problems.
Absolutely, and LeCun sees it as one of the grand challenges for AI.
So better planning JEPA with latent variables, hierarchical planning. Anything else?
He also emphasizes the importance of something called learning cost modules.
Cost modules.
Yeah, it's essentially teaching AI systems to understand what's desirable and undesirable, what actions to take and what to avoid.
So like instilling a sense of values or ethics in AI.
In a way, yeah, but it's more about defining the goals and objectives that guide the AI's behavior, helping it distinguish between good and bad outcomes.
So it's not just blindly optimizing for some random metric.
Right, it needs some guiding principles.
Makes sense.
And finally, he talks about this ongoing challenge of exploration.
Exploration.
Yeah, enabling AI systems to safely learn about the world through interaction.
That sounds tricky. How do you teach an AI to explore without letting it run amok?
It's a tough balance for sure, and LeCun admits there's still a lot of work to be done there.
So it's not just about building smarter AI, it's about making sure it's aligned with our values and operates safely.
Exactly.
And to address these challenges, LeCun gets even more specific, advocating for a particular approach to AI development.
He does.
What is it?
He's a big proponent of open source AI platform.
Open source.
Yeah.
Remind me, what exactly does that mean?
Basically, it means making all the tools and resources for building AI. The code, the models, the data. Freely available to anyone.
So it's like the difference between proprietary software that only a few companies can use and open source software that anyone can use, modify, and share.
That's a great analogy. And LeCun believes this is super important for AI because the stakes are so high. He doesn't want to see a future where the most powerful AI is controlled by a few companies.
Right, or governments.
Exactly, especially concentrated in the US and China.
Yeah, if these technologies are developed in secret, there's a real danger of concentrating power and limiting access.
For researchers and developers around the world.
Exactly.
And this leads to a really interesting point he makes. He cautions governments against enacting policies that restrict open source AI.
So he's basically saying that trying to hoard these technologies will backfire?
Yeah, he thinks that open collaboration is essential for progress. It allows researchers to build on each other's work, share ideas, address potential problems more effectively.
It's like saying, let's raise the tide for all boats, instead of trying to build bigger walls around our own little island.
Exactly, and he points to historical examples where research done in secret ultimately fell behind. He sees open collaboration as the engine of innovation, especially in a field as complex and rapidly evolving as AI.
It's a powerful argument, and it really aligns with the spirit of scientific discovery. But LeCun doesn't just talk about the technical and political aspects. He also talks about how AI might impact our lives in the future.
He does, and this is where things get really exciting.
Oh, like what?
He introduces this concept of universal virtual assistants.
Universal virtual assistants. Sounds futuristic.
It is, imagine having a personalized AI assistant that's with you at all times, mediating your interactions with the digital world.
So it's not just answering questions or setting reminders, it's actually understanding your needs, anticipating your desires, helping you navigate this increasingly complex digital world, like having a super intelligent extension of your mind.
That's a great way to put it, constantly learning and adapting.
That sounds incredible, but also kind of scary. Who needs to design these AI assistants?
That's a crucial question, and LeCun has some strong opinions about it.
I bet.
He believes these AI assistants should not be controlled by a small number of companies or governments.
Right.
He argues that the platforms for building them need to be open source,
Okay.
widely available, able to reflect the diversity of human cultures, languages, and value systems.
So it's a vision of AI that's inclusive and democratic, rather than centralized and controlled?
Exactly.
That gives me hope that AI can be used to empower individuals, not just corporations or governments.
And to realize this vision, LeCun thinks we need a global collaborative effort.
Okay.
He argues that no single entity can build truly advanced AI.
It's going to take all of us.
It requires the collective intelligence of researchers and developers worldwide,
It's like he's calling for an open source AI revolution.
a movement that transcends national borders and corporate interests.
It's pretty inspiring.
It is, and I think it speaks to his belief in the power of human ingenuity. When it's allowed to flourish freely and collaboratively, he sees open source development as the key to unlocking AI's full potential and ensuring that it benefits all of humanity.
That's a powerful message, but let's be real, building these universal virtual assistants is still a long way off.
It is.
And even if we get there, there are some potential downsides to think about, right?
Absolutely. Like any powerful technology, there's a risk of misuse or unintended consequences.
Right, we need to think about privacy control, how to prevent these systems from being manipulated or biased. It's like we're standing at the edge of uncharted territory. We can see the amazing possibilities, but we need to be careful.
Exactly.
And I think LeCun would agree. He's not naive about the challenges, but he's optimistic that we can overcome them if we approach AI development with the spirit of openness and collaboration and a commitment to ethical principles.
I think that's a great way to put it.
So we've only scratched the surface of LeCun's vision. It's so vast and multifaceted.
It is, and it raises so many important questions about the nature of intelligence, the role of technology in society, and what it means to be human in a world with AI.
A lot to think about.
It is, but it's a conversation worth having.
Absolutely, and one we'll be having for many years to come. Wow, so we've been exploring Yann LeCun's vision for AI, and he's got some really big ideas.
He does.
Like these universal virtual assistants that he talks about.
Right, and he's really clear that these wouldn't be like the simple AI assistants we have now.
Yeah, not just setting timers and playing music.
Exactly. He's talking about something much more capable
Yeah, like something that can really understand us and our needs.
and help us navigate a world that's getting more and more complex.
Yeah, almost like having a super intelligent sidekick with us all the time.
That's a good way to put it, but this level of personalization raises a big question. Who gets to design and control these AI systems?
And he's a big advocate for open source development, right?
He is. He really doesn't want to see these technologies controlled by just a few companies.
Or governments.
Exactly.
He wants the platforms for building these virtual assistants to be open and accessible to everyone.
That way they can reflect the diversity of human cultures and values.
Right, not just the interests of a few powerful entities.
Exactly.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about making sure that the development process is democratic and inclusive.
I think that's a really crucial point.
And to make this vision a reality, he thinks we need a global effort.
A worldwide collaboration of researchers and developers.
He doesn't think any one entity can do this alone.
It's too big of a challenge.
It's like he's calling for an open source AI revolution.
A movement that goes beyond borders and corporate interests.
That's pretty inspiring, honestly.
It is, and I think it shows his belief in human ingenuity and the power of collaboration.
But building these universal virtual assistants is still a long way off, right?
It is. There's a lot of work to be done.
And even if we succeed, there are still some potential downsides to consider.
Of course, like any powerful technology, there's always the risk of misuse or unintended consequences.
Yeah, we need to be thinking about things like privacy and control.
And how to prevent these AI systems from being manipulated or biased.
It's like we're at the beginning of a journey into uncharted territory.
We can see the amazing potential, but we also need to be aware of the risks.
And I think LeCun understands that,
He's not naive about the challenges,
but he's also optimistic that we can navigate them successfully.
especially if we approach AI development with the right mindset.
Openness, collaboration, ethical principles.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Yann LeCun's vision for AI, I'm feeling a mix of excitement and caution.
I think that's a very appropriate response.
It's a future that's full of potential, but it's up to us to shape it responsibly.
LeCun is giving us a roadmap, a set of challenges and principles to guide us on our journey.
And it's a journey that's just beginning.
Thanks for joining us for this exploration of AI future.
Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.